repeating carbines. Now, I haven't completely gotten the absolute facts on that, other than the fact that 13,000 of those were ordered by spring of 1863, 11,000 had been delivered, and we're pretty sure that Buford's 1,000 men had them. Now, what's the advantage of that? 99% of all the troops in the Civil War fired muzzle-loading muskets, in which they fired basically a .58 caliber soft lead bullet, and a very skilled person could fire 2 or maybe 3 rounds a minute. There were a number of weapons found on the battleground here that had 10 and 12 charges in them. The people got so excited, they loaded it, pulled it, it didn't go off, they didn't realize it, they loaded it again, and it did this, and they found them loaded up to the brink almost. But you could get 2 or 3 shots off. Well, Spencer repeating carbine carried 7 rounds in a tube magazine, could be reloaded, and could create a firepower of approximately 20 rounds a minute of a .56 caliber soft lead-nosed bullet. That was actually called 56-56. 56 grains of black powder shooting a 56 weight lead bullet. We know that when Heath gave reports back to Lee, he said, "I thought I was engaging militia, and it turned out to be a full Army Corps." And the only reason he would have thought something like that is if the 1,000 men of Buford's cavalry had been firing between 5,000 and 7,000 rounds in volleys because of the Spencer repeating carbines. That fact held them up. No, don't do that. Held them up, the Southern troops, for most of the whole day. This is day 1. Seminary Ridge, Chambersburg Pike, Heath's division's coming down. Over here is the railroad cut. They encounter Buford's cavalry dug in with multiple repeating rifles. Buford is up in the cupola of the Gettysburg Lutheran Seminary, directing everything from a very high vantage point. He could see all the stuff that was coming. What was happening with Heath's division, about 4,000, 5,000 men, is they're coming down a very narrow little road. At Lee's insistence that they not engage the enemy, and they ran into the first of the wooden rail fences, which are going to play a big part of day 3. They were very sturdy. You couldn't just knock them down or take them apart. They're walking down the road, and there's that deep railroad ditch. They had to get past that railroad ditch. Of course, they didn't know the troops were there yet, before they could have engaged out into the field to have attacked en masse against the northern troops. They couldn't. They were bottlenecked on the road. They were bottlenecked because of that railroad ditch. And so Buford's cavalry was able to hold Heath's division on that area for most of the first day of the battle. And essentially what happened is Heath lost positive control of his troops. These were, after all, Stonewall Jackson's men, who had won at Fredericksburg, who had won, up against what they thought was a bunch of ragged farmers with shotguns and squirrel rifles. And they got ticked off when they started shooting at them. And Heath lost control to stop them. They came across, they began to attack, and now suddenly they're being cut to ribbons by this mass fire, and they're sending word back, we need reinforcements, we need reinforcements. By the time Lee heard of this, he was infuriated, not a happy camper, but he said, the enemy is there, the battle is there, let's engage. He made that decision at the end of day 1. So he began to send his troops, which had been spread for more than 30 miles, out behind Heath to turn around and head towards Gettysburg instead of Harrisburg. Now, what would have happened if Jackson had been there? We're not 100% sure, of course. I should go back to the other map. But what happened is by the end of the day, the 20th New York Regiment, under the leadership of John Reynolds, called the New York Black Axe, had come up from the south. You realize that the Southern Army entered Gettysburg from the north, and the Northern Army entered Gettysburg from the south. And you go to Gettysburg and they say, the high water mark, the furthest north that Lee got. No, sorry, wrong. That's about 30 miles north of Gettysburg is where the furthest place that the Southern troops had ever gone. This is just where they finally got in the battle. They came into the city, and Heath ordered his troops, who were tired, cut up, shot, plus he was a more timid man than Stonewall Jackson was, to take possession of the town and not advance through the town as darkness was beginning to fall and take the heights of Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge. So at the end of the day, John Reynolds' troops were able to have, and along with Buford's cavalry, hold the Southern Army on the edge of Gettysburg. Reynolds was killed by a sniper within a few minutes of him arriving on the field. And he was from Harrisburg, and they had his body, with permission of the Confederacy, where a number of his West Point classmates were generals, helped to escort him through the ranks, his body, back to Harrisburg to be with for his parents to have. That's the kind of stuff that happened in the Civil War at that point in time.
Mitch, was there a lot of Spencer rifles found at Gettysburg?
Not too many found, no. Buford really was only engaged the first day, and the rest of the troops weren't issued those. That had to specially ask for them, and it was Buford who said, it doesn't make sense anymore to make the cavalry work like they did for Napoleon, because this ain't 1815. And he's the one who trained his troops to be mobile infantry, so that in a skirmish, and this happened in a couple of battles, he would dismount his troops, line them up, and they could move quickly, much faster than an average infantry regiment could do. And they had the firepower of a large number of people. Buford was wounded about 3 months after Gettysburg and eventually died of his injuries in December of 1863. Is that an answer for?
Yeah, I wondered, why didn't Colonel Custer have repeating rifles?
Well, I can give you an answer. It's a little bit long, but I'll do it real quick. There were three weapons that were being considered by the military post-Civil War: the Henry repeater, the Spencer repeater, and the now Springfield trapdoor metal cartridge. And they chose that one because they could load it fast, give about 7 rounds to a minute, as opposed to the old musket 3. But also, it really had a whomp to it. You got hit by a 45. I mean, they'll kill a bear if you can talk them into shooting it, So nobody got that. We need more people who are shooters. So they chose that because you got hit by a 45-70 and take it right off your horse. The difficulty was with Custer, other issues. That's another lecture for another time. The greatest general ever created in the United States, without a doubt. And a man with some incredible stories about him. He was the only one offered the command of both armies. Lee was offered the command of the Army of the Potomac. And he said, I regret deeply that I have to turn this down, but I cannot fight against my native land. And by that he meant Virginia. He was a part of the understanding that the state was your country, and the country was simply a system that allowed the state to have other things. Switzerland, by the way, is organized that way. 26 semi-independent cantons, and we can talk about that another time. So now we're moving to day 2. Here's Culp's Hill. This is the place that was initially taken by the 20th New York Division. And as the troops were coming up from both the Baltimore Pike and up the Tarrytown Road, they were beginning to fill in these locations. You have a low-lying hill here called Seminary Ridge that slowly drops off to a heavily wooded area and a flat area down in this general direction. You still have that railroad cut back here. You have a high point with Culp's Hill, a high point with Little Round Top, a high point with Big Round Top, and Cemetery Ridge is higher than Seminary Ridge. So all of this is high ground. That means all the attacks had to come up. But the most important thing that happened in day 2 was what they called the fishhook. This is the fishhook. The fishhook is this line that hooks around, really hooks around here. And that means that all the internal lines are very short. From here to here is maybe 1.5 miles. You've got 40,000 troops eventually in here, and if somebody attacks here, you're only 0.5 mile away to bring troops up to reinforce. Here, for the south, this, completely under observation by the northern artillery,